In the final days of September 2025, the quiet night over the Baltic coast concealed one of the most audacious long-range strikes of the war. At 12:25 a.m., the Primorsk oil port, Russia's billion-dollar gateway for exporting crude, was running its routine operations. Two enormous Aframax-class tankers, each valued at roughly $200 million, were tethered to the loading piers, ready to take on millions of barrels of oil bound for markets across the world. No one on the docks realized that hundreds of kilometers away, a storm of drones had already crossed the border. Far to the south, the monitors of a Nebo long-range VHF radar suddenly flickered with irregular signals. More than 70 contacts appeared simultaneously. Tiny radar signatures, uneven flight paths, scattered across a 1,000-kilometer front. Within minutes, alarms echoed through the Leningrad Oblast Air Defense Command. The 91DN6E Big Bird surveillance radar confirmed the swarm, and orders cascaded down to every S-400 and Panzer S-1 battery around St. Petersburg. Operators believed they were facing a massive air raid carrying 3 tons of explosives. Searchlights and tracer rounds tore the sky apart as the 92N6E gravestone radars locked onto the approaching echoes. At a lower altitude, the twin 30mm 2 A38M cannons of the Pantsires spat out 5,000 rounds per minute, forming a deadly wall of fire. Yet what appeared to be a direct assault was only a mask. The drones' flight paths had been pre-programmed to split across multiple directions, deliberately steering toward towns like Tosno, Pakhovskoye, and Usmino. Decoys meant to drag Russia's most advanced air defenses away from the true target, Primorsk. Inside an air defense bunker near Gachinsky, a young lieutenant triumphantly reported that his sector was clear and all incoming targets destroyed. That routine message, repeated up the chain of command, cemented a fatal illusion. In truth, the Russians had just fallen into the largest deception of their careers. Ukraine's operation had been planned for months. Out of the 70-plus drones, 35 AQ-400 Scythe units served as expendable bait. Another 40 dispersed through the Leningrad region, flooding radar screens with false signals. Hidden within the chaos were 15 UJ-26 Bober ER drones, extended-range variants carrying 40-kilon warheads and extra fuel tanks to reach 1,000 kilometer deep into enemy territory. Their survival was crucial. Supporting them were Banshee 7 electronic warfare drones, stripped of explosives but fitted with powerful jamming pods. They shadowed the strike group, blinding Russian radars while the plywood-bodied scythes absorbed missile salvos. By midnight, the swarm lifted off from launch sites inside Ukraine, flying low through valleys and along rivers, guided only by terrain maps. A few crashed into forests, losses already counted as acceptable. The rest pressed on in radio silence. Hours later, the decoy phase achieved its goal. The S-400s unleashed 48 N6 missiles in volleys, obliterating phantom targets and exhausting ammunition stocks. Beneath that thunderstorm of metal, the real killers slipped through undetected. 7 of the Bober ERs remained operational, racing through the pre-dawn fog toward the Baltic coast. Ahead of them lay Primorsk, Russia's lifeline, carrying 20% of its seaborne oil exports. What awaited was not another drone skirmish, but an economic earthquake waiting to detonate. At 4:45 a.m., as the horizon over the Baltic coast turned pale gray, the radar screens at Primorsk's own Panzer battery came alive with urgent signals. 7 fast-moving objects were closing in at treetop height, hugging the terrain, their radar signatures flickering like ghosts. The crew scrambled, launching 57 E-6 missiles in panic. But the drones were already too close, too low, and too fast. Within seconds, the attack formation split in two. 3 heading for the pumping station, and 4 streaking toward the tankers moored at the pier. One drone was intercepted mid-air, exploding harmlessly above the coastline. The remaining 2 slammed into the pumping station. The first carried a thermobaric warhead, detonating inside the control building. A blinding fireball erupted, followed by a shock wave so intense it tore through concrete walls like paper. The second hit moments later, striking the pipeline manifold, rupturing critical valves, and slicing through the heart of the facility. At that instant, Primorsk's main transfer system, the lifeline for millions of barrels per day, was severed. Out at the docks, the other 4 drones locked onto their prey. The Aframax tankers, Kapitan Lob and Sergei Gorskov. The first impact struck below the bridge of the Kapitan Lob, knocking out navigation electronics. A second drone smashed into one of its cargo tanks, igniting the oil within. The Sergei Gorskov was hit almost simultaneously. One strike ripping through its engine room, another shredding its loading manifolds. Flames shot dozens of meters into the air, mirrored on the slick surface of the harbor. Within moments, secondary explosions ripped through the port. 2 more Shadow Fleet vessels, the Kustuo and the Kiyun, both Aframax class, managed by Solstice Corp and Axaronix Limited. Tonnage 115,000 and 110,000 DWT respectively, were struck by debris and shockwaves. Both ships flew flags of convenience, part of Moscow's clandestine fleet designed to skirt international sanctions. Their decks burned fiercely as crew members fled in lifeboats. At 4:46 a.m., a second detonation shook the pumping station, the result of ruptured gas lines igniting beneath the control floor. Within 42 seconds, Primorsk was a sea of flame. The emergency shutdown systems failed. Damaged circuits prevented safety valves from closing. Burning fuel poured into drainage channels, igniting the port's access roads. By dawn, the inferno stretched for kilometers. Hours later, the Russian Ministry of Defense issued its familiar claim. 221 Ukrainian drones shot down, all attacks repelled. But satellite images told another story. Plumes of smoke rising from the Baltic coast, scorched docks, and crippled tankers listing in shallow water. The economic toll was staggering. Primorsk, responsible for roughly 20% of Russia's seaborne oil exports, had been knocked offline. Each tanker carried approximately 700,000 barrels of crude. The port itself handled around 1 million barrels per day. The temporary shutdown meant a revenue loss of $70–80 million daily, a direct hit to the Kremlin's war chest. Even beyond the flames, chaos spread. Pulkovo Airport in St. Petersburg rerouted 11 flights as airspace filled with radar clutter and falling debris. Across Leningrad Oblast, wreckage of decoy drones littered forests and villages. Yet amid the confusion, one truth stood clear. Ukraine's concept of warfare had just rewritten the rulebook. By using extended-range drones, electronic deception, and saturation tactics, Kyiv had pierced one of the densest air defense grids on Earth. The strike on Primorsk was more than an explosion. It was a warning. Even the most fortified economies could burn from within. Barely a week after the inferno at Primorsk, Russian command was still assessing the magnitude of its economic wounds when another operation unfolded, this time not against oil, but steel and firepower. At 07:15 a.m. on October 4, 2025, just 600 meters from the Ukrainian border, the Russian missile corvette GRAD, a $500 million warship armed with Kaliber cruise missiles, crept through the Volga-Baltic waterway. The vessel's mission was routine: transfer from the Baltic Fleet toward inland service routes, safely away from the drone-infested Black Sea. What the Russian crew didn't know was that Ukraine had been tracking them for months, and their safe corridor was about to become a death trap. From a concealed outpost several miles away, an SSO technician monitored the GRAD's movements through satellite feeds. This was the culmination of a 3-month intelligence campaign, following the ship's journey from the Baltic all the way to the Volga basin. The order to strike came when the vessel entered a narrow stretch of waterway, boxed in, unable to maneuver. Taking out the GRAD would not just sink a warship, it would silence one of Putin's primary missile platforms and cripple Russia's inland logistics. The Ukrainian strike relied on 5 Wild Hornet drones, each equipped with an AI-guided autopilot and PBX-12-shaped charges. But the real brilliance wasn't in the attack. It was how those drones got there. 72 hours earlier, a disguised cargo truck had left a warehouse near Bryansk, officially carrying furniture. Hidden inside false compartments were 5 Hornet kits, smuggled through checkpoints deep into enemy territory. By assembling them only 3 miles from the lakeshore, the SSO team saved crucial battery power for the final assault. At 07:00 a.m., under heavy fog, the drones launched. Silent, low, and invisible. 10 minutes later, alarms blared aboard the GRAD. The TK-25E electronic warfare suite roared to life, flooding the air with jamming signals to sever drone connections. But the Hornets were not controlled remotely. Their AI brains operated autonomously, cross-checking GPS data with internal sensors. When the jammer tried to trick them with false coordinates, claiming they were over Siberia, the drones knew the lie. They frequency hopped thousands of times per second, hunting for the true signal. At 07:11 a.m., 2 Hornets climbed, drawing the EW system's attention while the other 3 skimmed the water. The decoys were fried mid-air, their sacrifice clearing the path for the strike group. The AK-630 close-in weapon system, spewing 10,000 rounds per minute, tore the fog apart, but couldn't depress low enough to hit the drones hugging the surface. Sailors fired rifles blindly into the mist, a futile gesture. The lead Hornet's infrared camera locked onto the ship's glowing engine exhaust. At 07:14 a.m., the GRAD launched Igla surface-to-air missiles and a cloud of flares, hoping to lure the heat seekers away. The Ukrainian AI, trained on thousands of Russian flare signatures, ignored the decoys. One supporting drone deliberately overheated its motor, creating a brighter thermal signature to draw the missile off course. The gambit worked, but the explosion shredded the lead Hornet's wing. Smoking, its battery at 20%, the crippled drone still pressed forward. Within seconds, it breached the final defensive line. The SSO operator watched the FPV feed as the camera fixed on the warship's exhaust vent, the last image before blackout. The 8 PB-shaped charge detonated, piercing the engine housing and triggering a chain reaction. 1.3 seconds later, the missile magazine ignited. The GRAD, once a symbol of naval strength, erupted into a fireball that turned the tranquil lake into a graveyard of steel. The explosion that consumed the GRAD sent a towering plume of smoke spiraling into the overcast morning sky. Within seconds, fragments of steel and burning fuel rained down across the narrow Volga-Baltic channel, choking the waterway with twisted debris. On the monitors inside the SSO command truck, the live feed cut to static. But that was the confirmation they needed. The mission was complete. Miles away, the Ukrainian ground team was already executing its escape plan. Their Russian-registered truck rolled onto a dirt logging road, its false furniture panels ripped out and replaced with crates of local produce. By the time Russian patrols reached the area, the operatives were gone, just another delivery truck lost in the countryside. The Wild Hornets had done their job. A handful of low-cost drones had erased a $500 million warship from Moscow's arsenal and clogged a vital 680-meter stretch of Russia's inland maritime highway. The destruction of the GRAD paralyzed navigation through the Volga-Baltic corridor, halting movements of supply barges and missile carriers for days. Russia's propaganda machine called it a technical malfunction, but satellite images showed the truth. A charred hull resting barely 400 meters from Moscow's outskirts. The myth of an invulnerable Russian heartland was gone. Then, only weeks later, Ukraine struck again, this time farther south, where the Black Sea meets Crimea. After losing a third of its fleet, Russia had withdrawn its surviving ships to Kacha and Belbek air bases, but the respite didn't last. Ukrainian engineers, now veterans of Primorsk and GRAD, unleashed new drone waves, faster, stealthier, and guided by AI refined from previous battles. Targets once untouchable, S-400 launchers, Su-34 fighters, and ammunition trains fell victim to swarms that cost less than a single missile interceptor. By October's end, the pattern was undeniable. From the Baltic coast to the Crimean Peninsula, Ukraine had turned the concept of modern warfare on its head. Expensive fortifications, billion-dollar fleets, and sprawling defense grids crumbled before fleets of machines assembled in workshops and garages. What began as isolated strikes had become a doctrine. A new kind of war where intelligence, deception, and algorithmic precision outweighed brute force. A $10,000 drone could now outwit a $500 million warship. A swarm could paralyze an oil port, and a handful of technicians could shake the economic spine of a superpower. The era of asymmetric warfare had truly begun, and its echo was already spreading far beyond Ukraine's skies.